wind. It's just been windy.
But,
All good?
I mean, they
All
might
right.
be in water still.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and call the Planning Commission meeting to order, May 13th. We'll start off with approving the agenda and minutes. Entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
I will second the motion. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. All right, we'll move on to new business. We're going to start things off with Putt N Pets LLC, Sjogren, request for an interim use permit, 2026-2 IUP. Neva.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a request for an interim use permit in accordance with the Cook County Zoning Ordinance to allow a 5-year interim use permit for permanent seasonal use of one recreational vehicle in the General Commercial Zone District at 2014 West Highway 61. The applicant's property includes 1.89 acres. The property is entirely within the General Commercial Zone District. This use for RVs is not specifically a listed, permitted, or conditional use in the RC or in the General Commercial Zone District. This interim use permit is being considered under the provisions of Section 10.01 and 10.03D of the Cook County Zoning Ordinance, and this parcel is within the North Shore Management Zone of Lake Superior. The applicant, Aaron Sjogren, is requesting a 5-year interim use permit to allow recreational vehicle travel trailer to be allowed as a seasonal residence for 1 to 3 months per year between the months of May and October at Putt N Pets Mini Golf. The RV has been on site and used since 2019 with an RV permit from Land Services. During the last renewal application review, staff identified that in the General Commercial Zone District, RVs are not supported as a permitted use, and therefore the interim use permit was initiated. This property is within the North Shore Management Zone of Lake Superior and, as I mentioned, the General Commercial Zone District. The principal purpose of the General Commercial Zone District is to provide for basic commercial services to the public. This district is located in areas of greater population density with good access to major roadways. Limited light industrial activities are also allowed on a conditional use basis. The picture on the screen is the figure 1 from the staff report, the aerial image of the subject property from 2024, and the RV is visible on site there. The zone district patterns, this property, it might be hard to see on that map, but it's in that red blob, and it's kind of like the light blue circled red blob. So anything that's not like green, teal, yellow, or red is within city limits. And then, so this property is immediately right along the city boundary line and the county jurisdiction for zoning exercising authority. So this is in the general commercial, just right along the borders there of Cook County and city limits. Whoa, that's all I had for pictures apparently on this one. So Diana, if you want to turn off that screen, thank you. So recreational vehicles, as I mentioned, are not a listed, permitted, or conditional use in the General Commercial Zone District. As we've discussed before, the purpose of an interim use permit is similar to a conditional use permit, except for that an interim use permit is typically for a specific duration of time or until a specific event occurs. In this case, recommended as a 5-year proposed by the applicant. In your packets, figure 3 shows the subject RV from the street view. And I've also listed out the permitted and conditional uses. If you've had time to review your staff reports, you will notice that recreational vehicle is not a listed or permitted conditional use. For background, as was already mentioned, this property is also known as Putt N Pets Mini Golf and has had previous conditional use permits to allow the animal units in conjunction with the mini golf business. Permit records show the conditional use permit in 2013 and 2014 for the animal units for the mini golf course. The property owner applied for the RV permit in 2019, and a 2-year initial RV permit was issued by previous Land Services staff. Notes from that approval noted that it was for a 2-year period and that it could be renewed for a 3-year period after that time. Correspondingly to that, the RV was reapplied in 2021, and that was issued for 3 years as well. So last year, our staff identified when the next renewal was approached for another 3 years. So we had a new land use specialist who looked through the zoning ordinance and recognized that this wasn't a listed use. So some staff errors in there that we were trying to correct. There is a holding tank on the property. This property shares a septic system with a neighboring property. So each property has their own holding tank that goes into one treatment area. Jesse Johnson, the environmental health officer, did provide a memo for your packets about the septic system, saying that a septic inspection was going to be needed just due to the date of that installation. For impervious surface coverage, the RV does not increase existing impervious surface coverage, and there are no wetlands being impacted from this use. For public noticing, the application was legally noticed in the Cook County News Herald on April 24th. 17 letters of notification were sent to adjacent property owners, as well as county departments, the North Shore Management Board, City of Grand Marais, and the DNR hydrologist. No written comments were received by our office during the written comment period. One technical memo was provided by the environmental health officer and included in your packets. In your packets are some draft findings for your consideration to be revisited after the public hearing and deliberations, corresponding to the questions we are intended and supposed to ask for these types of requests. So the first question for reviewing this type of use is, number one, the use conforms to the land use or comprehensive plan for the county. Draft finding, the Cook County Land Use Guide Plan does not address recreational vehicles. Considering the purpose and allowable uses of the general commercial zone district, the presence and use of the RV since 2019, it appears that the use has not been unsuitable for the area. Number two, the use is compatible with the existing neighborhood. Proposed finding, this use is compatible with the existing recreational business and has not generated any complaints since it was established in 2019. Number three, the use will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement in the surrounding area of uses permitted by right in the zone district. Draft finding, the use has not generated complaints and should not have a negative impact on development of the properties in the surrounding area. Number four, the location and character of the proposed use is considered to be consistent with the desirable pattern of development for the area. Using an RV as a seasonal dwelling is a use that has been requested by other businesses in recent years, likely due to the limited affordable housing options. As such, this is consistent method available in the nearby abutting properties in the single-family residential R1 and the FAR 3 zone districts, where recreational vehicles are permitted uses. Staff recommendation for consideration. The proposed use appears non-problematic with surrounding land use patterns and zoning. The Planning Commission should consider the potential findings listed and modify or amend or adopt as they determine appropriate after the public hearing for recommendation of the Cook County Board of Commissioners. The following conditions could be considered. Number one, in accordance with the application for a travel trailer RV, the IUP is restricted to a towable, non-motorized RV. This IUP does not apply to motorhomes or fifth wheels. Number two, all local, state, and federal regulations must be adhered to. For example, the Cook County Recreational Vehicle Permit is required. Short-term rental of RV is prohibited. The property shall be in compliance with Minnesota State Rule 7080 and the Cook County Septic Ordinance. A new septic inspection shall be required by a private inspector. Number four, all permits necessary for the addition of decks or other structures shall be approved prior to the initiation of construction. And the last condition, this interim use permit shall be valid for 5 years or until transfer of property, whichever occurs first.
Thank you, Neva. Is the applicant present? And if you'd like to add anything, you can come up to the mic, state your name and address for the record.
I think it was covered pretty well. So.
Okay, great. Thanks for being here in case we have any questions. Then we'll open it up to public comment. If anyone has any comments on this application, please step to the mic, state your name and address. Seeing none. We'll close public comment and discuss as a board.
I don't have anything.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I would make a motion to approve with the following conditions, 1, 2, A, B, C, D, and 3.
All right. And are we comfortable with the findings of fact? Do we want to amend anything, add anything?
Nope, I think they're perfect.
I'm comfortable with them. Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. It'll be recommended to the Board of Commissioners. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to our next item. WTTC Land Management Co. LLC, request for an amendment to the existing conditional use permit in accordance with the zoning ordinance. Eva.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Diana, can you get the screen on when you get a chance? Thanks. This is a request to amend the existing conditional use permit. The last amendment to this was 2013-27 for the resolution. In accordance with the Cook County Zoning Ordinance to allow an increase of the existing gravel pit from 10 to 15 acres of active excavation in the pit adjacent to Cook County at 27 Ball Club Lake Road, and the addition of a wash plant at 224 Ball Club Road, zoned FAR 1. The applicant's property includes 42.46 acres. The property is zoned FAR1. Section 10.03B of the Cook County Zoning Ordinance stipulates in any zone district, conditional uses include number 8, extraction and processing of sand, gravel, and other minerals or gemstones. And finally, the property is non-shoreland. WTTC Land Management Co. LLC is requesting an amendment to the existing conditional use permit for the formerly Humphrey gravel pit to expand the active open pit area from 10 to 15 acres and allow gravel washing operations as a conditional use. The site is located north of the Cook County Airport between Ball Club Road and Benegami Lake. The Humphrey pit has a long permitting history with multiple amendments and approvals over time. In 1995, George and Cheryl Humphrey purchased the property. In 1996, there was the initial conditional use permit established for the gravel pit, allowing extraction, screening, and other future crushing and washing under conditions. The approval included 16 conditions, including a requirement that gravel washing could not occur until a complete operational plan, including machinery, water source drainage, sedimentation control, and production volume, was submitted to and approved by the Planning Commission. No operating hours were established at that time. In 2001, there was an amendment to that condition, or an approved addition for the asphalt hot mix plant. Operating hours were established from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., Monday through Saturday, with Sunday operations at the county's discretion. In 2013, there was amended Resolution 96.38 to increase the active excavation area from 5 to 10 acres. And in 2020, there was an approved interim use permit allowing aggregate washing for a 1-year period. In 2022, the previous owners, George and Cheryl Humphrey, requested an amendment to expand the pit from 10 to 15 acres. The Planning Commission recommended approval with conditions. However, the application was withdrawn prior to county board action. And in 2024, ownership transferred from the Humphreys to WTTC Land Management Co. LLC. The current request revisits the 2022 proposal to expand the active extraction area and adds the request for the wash plant. I'll just keep it on there. The Humphrey pit is included in the county's annual gravel pit review process. The site is situated within a prominent esker formation and does not contain wetlands or surface water resources within the active pit boundary. Surrounding landscape features are characterized by a network of water resources, wetlands, and additional esker formations. Notably, the nearby KGM and Cook County pits are part of the same broader geologic system that formed the resource present at the Humphrey site. For wetlands, a 2013 survey identified wetlands on the parcel. However, the proposed expansion area is outside of the mapped wetland boundaries. Cook County Wetland Specialist Mitch Travis provided a technical memo indicating the following, and I'm just going to zoom ahead. Well, I don't have it on there. Apologies. It's in your packet, the survey that shows the wetland boundary. So please refer to the attached survey. Again, sorry I didn't get that on the screen for this part. For George and Humphrey construction prepared by Brett Land Surveying in June 2013. This survey accurately represents the wetlands present on the property. If the appropriate buffers from wetland features are maintained and best management practices are installed, typically berms with earth vegetation, I would not anticipate any indirect impacts to surrounding wetlands. Additionally, if the gravel wash operation and associated holding ponds are constructed in the central areas of the existing pit, the local government unit would not anticipate groundwater drawdown to the surrounding wetlands and would not see the need for monitoring wells. The proposed area for the wash operations has already infiltrated the groundwater table with no apparent impact to neighboring wetlands and would appear to be a viable location for future wash operation use. There are no public waters or sensitive resources near this pit, as it has been the case with other gravel pits where monitoring wells were deemed necessary. And that survey map that Mitch was referring to in that memo is figure 1 in your packets, if you have that available. For zoning considerations, the pit is located outside of shoreland area in the FAR1 Forest Agriculture Recreation Zone District. The principal purpose of the FAR1 district is to provide for forest management, agriculture uses, and recreation activity in the less developed areas of the county. Extraction and processing of sand, gravel, and other minerals are allowed as a conditional use in any zone district per section 10.03B8 of the Cook County Zoning Ordinance. Special criteria and requirements are outlined in section 10.06. Other allowable uses of the FAR1 zone district are included in your packet on page 4 and 5 of this section of the staff report. And in this picture, the white is the FAR1 zone district. So this subject property is the blue outlined polygon kind of in the middle top part of that between Benegami Lake and the Ball Club Road, which is over in the orange section. And that's Devil Track Lake on the south of there. For project details, the applicants are requesting to amend the conditional use permit to increase the allowable pit area by 5 acres and expand the operating area of the pit. Currently, the pit is allowed to have 10 acres open excavation. The applicants would like to increase this to 15 acres, expanding into the area immediately east of the current pit area. The wash plant is proposed in the low point of the pit area. The application provides greater details as to the reasons for both of these requests, but are generally summarized as follows. The additional 5 acres request includes the following reasons as provided by the applicant. Stockpiling of materials is necessary and requires separate piles for different types of materials created in the pit with enough spacing to avoid cross-contamination. Adequate spacing for mobilization and operation of the gravel production equipment. Space for truck hauling traffic patterns. And the current 10-acre allowance is taken up with the existing stockpiles, and as the application states, approval of this CUP request will allow for additional space to meet the noted needs for stockpiling, producing, and hauling, while also maintaining access to necessary raw materials. This CUP will allow operation of this pit in a safe manner, as the Humphreys and now Northland have done for many years. Open area includes all areas of the gravel pit where pre-existing vegetation has been removed, topsoil has been stripped, and excavation with stockpiling has begun. Areas intended for travel and/or equipment storage do not constitute open area and are not included in the open area calculation. For the gravel washing request, Resolution 96.38 from 1996, establishing the conditional use permit, included 16 conditions, which included condition number 3, which prohibited gravel washing until a complete operational plan was submitted and reviewed by the Planning Commission. The required plan must address machinery, water source drainage, sedimentation control, and material volume for approval or denial. In 2020, a 1-year interim use permit was approved to allow gravel washing on a temporary basis, and there was a technical memo included by WINC at that point in time. I'm not going to read through the whole thing because I've got a lot to get through here, but I'm hoping that you all did your homework and you read it. The summary of the gravel pit operation, the image that you have on the screen, was provided in that WINC memo from that 2020 interim use permit. Essentially, they're not bringing water onto the site for the wash plant. They're grabbing the water that naturally accumulates in the bottom part of the existing pit, and that water recirculates throughout the process. It's not being taken off site, and it's not coming into the site from like a surface water, for example. There are a lot of conditions that were included that currently apply. I've included that in your packets for your review. And staff recommends that if this request is approved, conditions be included to address current operational considerations and to update and replace relevant conditions from prior approvals as appropriate. For public noticing, the application was legally noticed in the Cook County News Herald on April 24th. 11 letters of notification were sent to adjacent property owners, as well as county departments and the DNR hydrologist. Written comments were received. One was from Susan Perrin-Schubert at 319 Pine Mountain Road, provided written comments and materials for the Planning Commission and County Board's consideration. Ms. Perrin-Schubert provided materials that discuss the noise aspect of her concerns relative to noise traveling over water, environmental regulations regarding noise. There are 3 main requests identified in her written comment, as well as 2 additional concerns. Number 1, the permit to be an interim use permit requiring future review of operations, monitoring data, and adjustments. Number 2, request strategic stockpiling during peak summer months to reduce noise from processing. And number 3, limit operating hours from 8 to 6 with no weekend work during peak summer months. In addition, number 4, different alarm mechanisms, and number 5, requiring a wetland delineation. In your packets also is a memo from the Cook County Soil and Water Conservation District. Number 2, Max Tossenson, providing a technical memo with recommendations. There's also the previously mentioned technical memo from the Cook County Wetland Specialist, Mitch Travis, indicating a wetlands delineation is not necessary for the proposed project. And lastly, the U.S. Forest Service Realty Specialist, Kathy Peterson, provided a comment to ensure that there's no encroachment onto federal lands, including water runoff from gravel washing operations. I did include some background information in your packets about noise regulations. Minnesota Rule 7030 outline the amount of noise for the amount of time that's allowable per state rules, since that was one of the objections from one of the neighbors. So that's there, and we can revisit that if we want to further discuss that item. I provided some draft findings for your consideration. We can revisit that when you're ready to go through some draft findings after the public hearing portion is held. For staff consideration, permitted gravel pits in Cook County are subject to annual review processes intended to evaluate compliance with approved conditions and operational standards. The previous property owner and applicant have historically submitted the annual documentation as required, and county staff have conducted periodic site inspections to verify compliance with permit conditions. The surrounding area is predominantly public land with no identified private residential development located within approximately 3/4 mile of the operation. The nearest residential structure identifiable by staff on aerial imagery is a cabin on the southwest side of Benegami Lake, approximately 0.79 miles over 4,000 feet from the east property line of the pit. For comparison, the Cook County Zoning Ordinance requires a 2,500-foot minimum setback from residential structures for asphalt plants. The nearby airport is also an existing noise-generating land use within this area. Cook County's geology contains relatively limited aggregate resources, and the zoning ordinance recognizes gravel extraction as a conditional use due to the location-specific and scarce nature of these materials. Many deposits occur as glacial eskers or similar formations, limiting where excavation activities can reasonably occur. The Planning Commission may also consider the short northern Minnesota construction season, which can compress the timing and intensity of extraction and processing activities. Written comments submitted regarding this request primarily related to operational noise and impacts. Noise generation is an inherent component of gravel extraction and processing activities, including crushing, screening, and washing operations previously authorized on site. Staff note that the location of this pit, largely surrounded by public land and separated from concentrated residential development, helps minimize impacts compared to alternative locations closer to developed areas. The Planning Commission may consider operational conditions related to hours of operations, screening, berming, restoration, erosion control, and other performance standards authorized under Section 10.04D of the Cook County Zoning Ordinance. Staff recommend caution on imposing conditions that could unintentionally conflict with equipment safety requirements or standard workplace safety practices. If approved, staff recommend consolidating and updating prior permit conditions into one comprehensive set of conditions governing operation, restoration, and wash plant activities for the site. I went through all of the conditions that were on the previous approvals because this is an expansion and also with a wash plant, and there was some redundancy and also conflict between some of those conditions. So if this is recommended for approval with conditions, the full list of draft conditions here are a consolidation of the existing conditions as well as some modifications for your consideration. For example, like the restoration plan was a little vague as to what that restoration plan would actually be. So that would be an area for significant improvement with an improved condition. And also I would recommend condition number 30 if you want to consider that, just clarifying that all conditions of the previous resolutions from 1996, 2001, and 2013 shall be replaced by the conditions in this so that there's one consolidated place. Typically when we process conditional use permits, we can't go back in time and change conditions that have already been approved. However, this is a continuance of those, and we're not changing the conditions to be more restrictive in any of them that are listed here, at least by how my review of it was. So we can talk more in detail when and if we get to that point, but that's what I have for you now.
All right, thank you very much. Is the applicant present? If you'd like to step forward and if there's anything you'd like to add, state your name and address for the record, please.
I don't have anything to add, but my name's Jeremy Carlson. I'm with Northland Constructors. WTTC is part of our parent company's ownership of the property. So I'm here to represent. But I have nothing else to add to the package she explained.
Okay, great, thank you. We'll open it up to public comment if there's anyone that would like to step forward to the microphone, state your name and address, and anything you'd like to say. And I'll also add, if you've written in, please try not to repeat what you've already written. We've all read the packet, just for time management's sake. So if you have new things to add.
Hi, everybody. I'm David Howe, and maybe 8 years ago, I was lost delivering firewood, like I usually am in Cook County, and ended up at the gravel pit. And since then, we've purchased product out of the gravel pit, and it's very good quality, and it's close by. And with today's fuel prices, having quality aggregates close by is a real benefit to the community. So I'm in favor of going forward with this request. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak on this proposal? All right, we'll go ahead and close the public comment then and discuss as a board. Thoughts?
Just a question for Neva of clarification. They currently wash here? No.
It was a.
That's part of the,
Yeah,
that
it was
was,
an interim use permit in 2020 for a very specific road project.
okay, and so we want to they want to resurrect that washing process?
Yes, and they would like it as a conditional use. And I think one thing that's a little tricky with wash plants as interim use permits is when contractors are bidding on projects, if they get that bid, then they've got a pretty short time period to then figure out where they're gonna get that interim use permit. And that processing time of these public hearings can take a good bit of time sometimes. So,
Correct.
Hence the conditional use permit request.
Okay. Did we as a county accumulate any information of that short-term washing? As far as it worked, it didn't work, the settling pond worked, so on?
It's maybe something Jeremy might have direct information on. I was not at the county and I didn't see anything in our files from that, but I'll also note that that was in 2020 and everything went a little wonky in that time period. So I didn't come across any kind of monitoring information. It probably is detailed in their annual report that was done January 2021, but I didn't go back in time and look through each of the annual reviews.
Okay.
Did you have anything to add to that? Maybe just to respond directly if you have any experience of that.
The only thing I'd say is I don't recall any requests for any information during or after that particular process. But like Neva said, if there was something in the annual report that year, the Humphreys still owned it at that time, so you'd have to check, I suppose, if there was any information provided for that annual report.
And so follow-up, so essentially what's being proposed is very similar to what was proposed in that earlier time period? A settling pond or an extraction, water extraction
Yep.
pond?
Yeah, their
Okay.
application directly included stuff from that 2020 application.
Okay.
I would say the only main difference is that in the draft conditions staff have provided, there's much more clarity as to what the county is expecting to see as a part of this process. So if this was approved, the county would want to see a specific restoration plan on file. We were unable to find one when we went through the
Right.
application initially to see what we had existing on this from 1996. So that's something, if this was approved, that our staff would work with Northland and the Soil and Water Conservation District to put together a good quality restoration plan that talks about what's happening with the landscape when the pit is ready for closure. And
Okay.
getting that on file would be a big, good thing.
Correct. I can agree with that. Thank you. Nothing else, Mr. Chair?
Any other thoughts?
The only thing that I would comment on is that the last time I was involved in a review of all the gravel pits in Cook County, one of the things that we were focusing on was sticking to the 10-acre open area pretty strictly. And my concern would be that either A, this will encourage other gravel pits to then apply for larger spaces, which may or may not be a good thing. But it also creates a competitive advantage. As there is someone else in the room who actually has a gravel pit, I would entertain comment on that concept if that person wanted to.
I don't know if it's appropriate since public comment closed.
Sure.
Can we reopen
I-
public?
I think that it's a direct question. I would entertain it as additional information if
I
we're
could-
within bounds.
I could also try to address it.
Sure.
Maybe. I think it's a really good point about competitive advantage. I don't, in my perspective, if the pits have larger open areas, I don't see a specific downside in the sense that if we are getting better quality restoration plans, on these files, and with these amendments, we say, okay, you get a larger pit area, but we really need better restoration plans, because in all of our gravel pit permitting, that is the biggest weakness point, is understanding what is the expectation when these pits are ready for closure. I think in my perspective, I've really gained a greater appreciation of how difficult it is for these materials to become accessible for use, especially at a reasonable price for our community. And so I don't want regulatory barriers to be unnecessarily burdensome. So if there's a real operational benefit, which I think this application does outline, in the sense of maybe they got a wide variety of materials and they need that stockpiling, I don't want to presume to make unnecessary restrictions on that. Unless we can think of anything other than competitive advantage, if there's a very specific reason why 10 acres versus 15, it seems like kind of a magical number. I don't know specifically why that number would be picked. And so, you know, to that point, I don't have a great spreadsheet that shows every pit and what their maximum area is. It should also be noted that there are grandfathered pits in the county that have no restrictions, besides they just can't go beyond their property boundaries, and those are not held to any type of open pit area. So these are the pits that already are having a lot of scrutiny, but there are a lot of grandfathered pits too that kind of get a lot more flexibility. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
It does. So I guess the only thing that I would say is that we want to create, there is already a condition for a detailed reclamation plan. As long as we include that in our list of conditions, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I take the point. I think it makes me think about the balance between, you know, an already excavated site and a new excavation site, and the pros and cons of allowing one to be larger or essentially forcing the excavation to happen somewhere else.
And I
You know,
too,
that's a balance, yeah.
And I have also wondered, you know, why is 10 acres the magic number when there are already grandfathered pits that are considerably larger, so.
Notably, 10 acres is not outlined in the ordinance. You know, it's not like it says somewhere in the ordinance, pits shall remain at 10 acres or less of open pit area. It's been more of like a policy application, I think. So we very well may see other pits respond to this, requesting amendments. And in my opinion, it depends on the site. If there's really sensitive water resources, or if it's next to private land, like much closer to private land, I think that those would be, you know, factors that we would play. But in this location, non-shoreline, relatively further away from residential properties, I would view that different, and that's why we do the conditional use process, right? Every site is viewed by its own merits. It's not just a, you know, consistent thing everywhere.
Any other thoughts? Members?
I just weigh in, I agree that a quality restoration plan is really needed, because we, in my time on this commission, we've approved 2 new pits that I would agree, I thought the restoration plans were extremely weak and very hard to kind of say, yes, when you do this, this is what you said you were going to do, and this is what you said, not what you said you were going to do. So there really weren't any parameters that we could use to establish that the restoration had been done in a proper manner and done with best practices and things like that. So it would be nice to see restoration plans that do have some endpoints and some discussion. If nothing else, I think it helps the owner understand that there's an expense involved in restoration. Restoring a mine site is not cheap, and that should factor into their decision. I'm going to build a pit and make some money off it and then walk away from it, which then leaves the residents of the county holding the bag, so to speak. So I would strongly encourage we develop good restoration plans.
Do you feel like 2 through 5 are adequate, or are we looking for more than that yet, or?
No, I think
Well, 28 also addresses the restoration plan.
well, yeah, 28, we don't really
6
say a
months.
lot.
It gives it the time frame.
Shall be sort, yeah, in accordance with the approved restoration plan within 6 months.
Another small thing, Neva mentioned number 30. I don't see a number 30 here.
No, I put it on the screen.
She added it on
Right.
the screen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and number
Yeah.
30 was basically citing previous resolutions and saying they have been kind of commingled into this main one.
Yeah, I heard it, I didn't see it.
It would
Thank
be
you.
good to double check with the applicant too, that he's had a chance to review all these conditions and see if he has any concerns with them as well.
Have you?
Yes, no concerns with
Okay.
Paul's proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I mean, 28 does say it shall be restored in accordance with approved restoration plan.
In 6 months.
Does that suggest that approving this use is a contingent upon seeing that plan and that county staff has approved that plan?
Yes, so with these
Yeah.
conditions,
Yeah,
the
which
wash
one
plans
is
and the
that?
expansion into the additional 5 acres could not begin until we had all of these conditions on file. So in the future, staff will go into this file and see that restoration plan that's been done as a part of that. And it takes
Okay.
them some time. It would just take some time before they can go into that next 5 acres and begin the
Right,
wash
right,
plan.
because they can continue to operate their current 10, but the 5-acre expansion is not possible until that plan has been submitted, approved, and on file
Mhm.
then? Okay,
Yeah.
okay, I feel comfortable with that.
And then the time frame in 28.
Yeah, I think that's great to bound it and have an expectation about how quickly that happens
Yep,
after it's closed.
I agree with that.
6 months is pretty short for restoration on a 15-acre site. but-
Yes, especially if it happens.
Should we alter
In
that to
August.
12?
Well, or maybe it should be, shall be initiated within 6 months of closure. And then the plan, theoretically, or ideally, a restoration plan should have some checkpoints. You know, soil grading's gonna be done at this point, vegetation establishment, final vegetation establishment, and you have some goals that you need to meet those. That's
So-
typically the way state of Minnesota does mine closure plans.
So that would be delineated in that restoration plan.
Plan would set forth.
So
that
if
the
it's
staff would
initiated within 6
But the
months.
staff would be approving that.
approve. Right, right. Because, yeah, if you're gonna establish natural vegetation, especially if you're gonna do forested, you're talking 4 to 5 years before you can say that that's fully successful, probably. That long. I did a black ash swamp in Aiken County, and it was 10 years before the Corps of Engineers would agree that was complete, so.
So what would we want to do about number 28 then? Because 6 months is obviously way too short.
Well, we can just change 28, the word restored to initiated.
Initiated. I could, yeah, that's a good point.
But
yeah.
do we want some endpoint, so they can't sit on it forever?
Probably.
Would that be part of the plan that staff approves?
That would be something you guys would look at?
Yeah, yeah, I think this is always difficult with gravel pit restoration. It doesn't, I think to Jeff's point, it can take a long time, but also recognizing property might change ownership. You know, there's nothing that says they can't sell the property to someone else. So the easiest way I see it is we have the plan with this property owner, and we say it has to get initiated at least by a certain point, and the plan itself will then trigger timelines.
Okay.
You know, I think it's kind of the best we can do.
And the plan would essentially attach to the land then?
Mhm.
It would run with the land?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the land
Just
probably
like-
could be used
yeah.
for other uses in the future. If someone wants it for hunting land, or, you know, try to put a house out there, cabin, seclusion.
Just playing devil's advocate theoretically, so someone else buys it and discontinues it as a pit.
Mhm.
Are they left holding this restoration plan?
So we don't have any type of financial surety attached to this. that would be the only mechanism through which, if it changed ownership and the county really wanted to leverage saying, hey, half your trees died because you didn't water them, that's where the financial surety component goes into it. I'm unfamiliar with all of our pits that are permitted, if we've got financial surety requirements for like just general pits. I wouldn't be surprised if we had them for like asphalt plants or something that was next to more sensitive resources. So just thinking ahead to that question, I'm not sure if we did that, if this would be a first for that or not. And we could always table, and you know, if you need additional information for these sort of considerations, we can look that up.
What would legal staff say about the creation of a lien,
Or performance bond. or
performance
something
bond
like
or a lien?
I would say that the county attorney would need more specific information to go over under, especially with an operation of this size and complexity.
On another project, so the cell tower that was before this group last year, there was a financial surety component connected with that. And the way the planning commission identified that, they said it was in the form satisfactory to the attorney's office. So the planning commission wasn't too prescriptive whether it was a performance bond or you know, another type of financial mechanism. At this point, I just wouldn't know what dollar figure to attach. We would probably want to consult with like the Soil and Water Conservation District to get some baseline, you know, cost of what that expectation would be. But if this is, you know, what this board wants for additional information for reviewing it, like if you don't want to make a decision without seeing that restoration plan and what that financial expectation is, you know, that's where tabling it and asking for that additional information is within your abilities.
So,
Is that something that you could put in though, when before you approve it, the restoration plan?
I think if you say what you want in the restoration plan and the conditions, that gives staff the clarity of what expectations when we work with the applicant later. So if you say a restoration plan that is done, that outlines timelines and phasing in accordance with, and maybe citing the Minnesota mine closure, you know, processes. I'm not familiar with that checklist myself. The document I have is from the DNR from the 1990s, and that's the best guidance document I have on gravel pits, so there's probably room for improvement. So considering that, and if you said that you want financial assurance for the completion of the pit, we could probably see what coordination we can have, that, you know, as long as we kind of understand what you want the conditions to be, that we could apply to work with the applicant.
So, we have other gravel pits. Now we require a performance bond from one that wants to do an expansion. It seems like it creates kind of an unlevel playing field. They now have to pay for a performance bond. And so is there a mechanism that we have that other quarries, or gravel pits, quarries are different, but that currently exists, that come back in for review, do we have a mechanism then that we ask them for continuation of their permit, if it's an interim permit or whatever, that we want a restoration plan to be reviewed and approved, and a performance bond to go with that restoration, so that we put all of the gravel pits on the same footing?
The difficulty with that is that we can't add on conditions to things that have already been approved. I
Correct.
do stand corrected, though, there is one other pit that has had, I believe, a letter of credit, something from their bank, that's always been a part of their annual review. I just don't remember what aspect of that pit needed that financial assurance. So this wouldn't be the first pit that needed some form of financial assurance connected to it.
guess I was just playing on the worst-case scenario. And if someone purchases this property after it's been closed, and there is no attachment covenant that requires them to do that, and there's no financial, it opens things up for problems. So I'm trying to think of some way. I also agree it could be egregious to force people to then get a bond, et cetera, and does create an unlevel playing field. Maybe there's another mechanism that we haven't thought of or hasn't been discussed yet, and maybe now is not the time to try to figure that out, but it might be worth moving forward to try to create something upon renewals or expansions for that process to occur.
And I mean, specifically the renewal process, that's not coming before us, and it's not an amendment to a CUP or an IUP, so we don't get a bite at that apple necessarily.
Yeah, so the way the county used to do it was, and you'll find this in the older conditions, they used to say that the conditional use permit was granted, but every year it would be reissued. And as we know from our land use legal trainings with the attorneys that we work with, you can't reissue a conditional use permit. It's a property right, so long as all those conditions are being met. And so the way we have kind of appeased the intent of that condition is that we do the annual staff's review. So at the end of every year, at the end of the construction season, I send out a letter to all the gravel pit owners that have permitted pits, so not the grandfathered pits. And we say, hey, it's time for, the annual review. Please send me, what has been the quantities this year, what operations have you done? Basically show us that you're meeting the conditions of your permit approval. So that is our process that we're checking the boxes and we're having those conversations about what's your stormwater best management practices. If we find in that review that there's really sensitive wetland resources that required monitoring wells, we say, have you been doing your monitoring wells? And we have those, it gives us room and space to have those conversations and remind those pit owners that you have conditions of approval, and let's talk about whether or not we're having issues meeting those conditions. Historically, this was a presentation to the Planning Commission and then the County Board. We felt that unless there was issues, we really didn't need to air all of that information very publicly. And so now we as staff do that review internally, and we know that if we have some issues with compliance, then we will elevate it to more of that public viewing area. But we're not reissuing pits every year. It's a conditional use, it's a property right, and so we need to kind of respect that. Previous boards had a different perspective, unfortunately.
I mean, I do consider if this runs with the land that.
Well, if you're the buyer, you should do your homework.
Exactly.
And then that would be the responsibility of the negotiation with the seller, if this was done or not.
Right. Yeah.
It's not really our job to figure that out.
It's going to come up on a title search, and it's going to not make it very saleable. Ideally,
Right.
Yeah. There's a big attachment to this land, and it's pretty obvious that it's a pit, so it's,
Right.
it's what you're buying.
So for number 30, moving slightly forward, you said you wanted to add the resolution from 2013?
Condition number 30 would be recognizing the three previous resolutions, so 1996, the 2013, and the 2003, I think.
2001.
And recognizing that those are they're basically that we're referring to these conditions. I don't remember the exact phrasing I have on that slide. You can look that up.
There you go.
Thank you. So draft language is all conditions attached to Resolution 96-53, 2001-51, and 2013-27 shall be replaced by the conditions outlined in this amendment. And like I said before, typically you can't go back in time and just say those conditions are changed. As I did my review, and we can, double, triple check this before it goes to the county board, the conditions here are not more restrictive necessarily, but we are clarifying, like hours of operation are something that were a little confusing between all the different things. I think because this is the nature of these activities, there is nothing wrong with setting hours of operation, especially, given the expansion and given the wash plant. It's just that the conditions have to be relative to the request at hand, which is a little, sorry. No.
So is the meaning of number 30 that if approved, these conditions supersede all prior.
That's a better word.
Okay. I
Yeah.
just want to make sure
Super,
I was
thank you.
understanding.
Yeah, because it gets really confusing when you're going through 4 different resolutions. And I'm trying to add clarity for both the applicant, property owner, operator, and staff in the future when we do that annual gravel pit review. So we just have one list of conditions. But this wasn't meant to like go back in time and change any of the earlier ones. If anything, just adding on more and adding more clarity to new ones.
And based on that letter that we've received, do we want to look at number 12, at any hours of operation, changing those or keeping those as is? Right now it's 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Saturday. Minus Sundays and holidays.
I mean, I don't know what other pits are held to, but that stuck out to me as something, we got one comment about that, but I could see that being annoying living next to a lot of that. I don't know how much it goes on.
Mhm.
The beeping specifically.
I would say I'm generally comfortable with those hours,
Yeah.
honestly, that it's limited
It's
to
daylight.
construction season, it's daylight in the summer, you know, that seems reasonable to me, 8 PM.
I'll motion to approve with all these conditions and then adding 30.
Okay.
And
And do
Oh,
we
and
want to
changing
change?
28, that verbiage. What was it? Oh, yeah, restored to initiated.
Is that going to be 12 months?
Just initiated within
6.
6.
So the conversation.
Yeah.
What was adding 30? What was 30?
30 was the one that was on the prior screen, that the 2026 CUP will supersede all prior resolutions, 2001, 2013, and 2020.
And Mr. Chair, I'd like to propose one other addition for item 2, condition 2, item I, performance standards for restoration should be part of the plan. So we have some milestones to figure out. when
I wrote
is it-
down.
And a timeline.
Yeah, a timeline and financial packet as needed. Would be my eye.
Surety, financial surety as needed? Is that
Mhm.
that word?
Mhm.
Yep.
To be reviewed by the county attorney, I think, is where we left that and found acceptable.
If they were
So
good with
that'd
that.
be like I, J, and K.
May I read
Could you-
back to you how I have that written out?
Yep.
Please.
So item I, performance standards for restoration, including a timeline and financial surety as needed to be reviewed by the county attorney.
Yep. And that can be one, correct? Aye. All under one. And then what did we change? Number 28, yep. I think that's all I have.
Within, yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion with an amendment, with the conditions as written, with an amendment to number 2, adding item I, and number 28, changing the verbiage to initiated within 6 months and adding condition 30 as written.
I would second that motion.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. I'll move to the Board of Commissioners. All right, next up, we have Lucky Soul Holdings LLC / Ledgerock Holdings LLC. This is the request for the rezone of the single-family residential to resort commercial residential. Neva?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right. The parcel is 1.72 acres, currently zoned single-family residential. R1 has a 1 acre minimum lot size requirement on Lake Superior, and the proposed resort commercial residential zone district has a 5 acre minimum lot size requirements. The applicant requests to rezone parcel 51-019-3150, 1.72 acres east of Solbakken Resort from the single-family residential R1 to the resort commercial residential RCR zone district. The applicant has described the request as follows. The current parcel is one of two parcels associated with Solbakken Resort. The other parcel is zoned RCR and classified as commercial seasonal resort recreational. The current parcel is zoned as R1 and classified as a commercial seasonal resort recreational. Solbakken is operating on both of these parcels as a year-round resort, and we would like these parcels to be zoned the same. This would help maintain consistency on the zoning classification as both parcels are being utilized for the same use. This application is being processed in parallel to a conditional use permit for both parcels and associated with Solbakken Resort for a commercial planned unit development for a resort conversion to allow the units to be separately owned but still share infrastructure through the platting process. For background and site characteristics, the parcel is in common ownership with the abutting Solbakken property. Currently, the subject parcel property has a residential structure identified on the tax records as Jonas House, a detached garage shop, a bunkhouse, and a driveway. So the pink that shows up on that map is the RCR zone district. So this parcel is one of those greens in between the two pinks, and the green is the single-family residential. The red on that map is the general commercial, which is generally next to Isaac Hansen's in the Lutsen area, and the yellow is the FAR 3 zone district. On this, you'll see the, well, sorry if it's too small to make sense, but the aerial photo there is showing that Jonas House, and there's a blue line, and it's so it's showing the two separate parcels that make up Solbakken Resort, and the way that corresponds with that hand drawing of the water plan diagram is just showing that this Jonas House on this parcel is functionally connected to the infrastructure on the neighboring parcel that creates Solbakken Resort. So the two parcels, all Solbakken, connecting utilities between the two. Just this one is zoned R1 and the other one is RCR, Resort Commercial Residential. I've included some information about the Cook County Land Use Guide Plan. There are guiding principles that talk about land use. One of the policies talks about rezoning. Rezoning of land must evaluate impacts on but not limit to relationship to land use plan, benefit to the overall community, adjacent use, air, water, and quality, traffic generation, public safety and health, area aesthetics, and economic impact on the area. Additionally, rezonings of land must consider the existing quantity of land available at the appropriate locations and at the time of the given purpose. There's a commercial goal to provide commercial facilities to meet the needs of residents and visitors, which includes two policies that include encourage expanded development of tourist lodging, commercial services, worker housing, and amenities to strengthen the county's tourism destination. And number 42, specialized commercial activity, including resorts, that depend on and require specific site conditions can coexist with residential and other land uses through the application of standards regarding screening from adjacent uses, traffic conditions, size and scope of the activity, and other similar concerns. Additionally, there's a public facilities and services goal to provide quality public services and the delivery of public services that meet the needs of residents and visitors and are justifiable in terms of cost effectiveness, which includes the adequacy and economics of public services and the review of specific rezoning proposals of conditional use permits is a valid part of their consideration and should be evaluated in every case. In the Cook County Land Use Guide Plan, it talks about the Highway 61 corridor. I've included that language for you. It recognizes along the Highway 61 corridor that there are a lot of existing resorts, as well as a lot of other aesthetics to that. All right, and then additionally, the Cook County Land Use Guide Plan talks about the West End Community Centers, which kind of recognizes the Tofty, Lutsen, and Schroeder kind of all have these defined town centers, and they want, in these guide plans, they want the town centers to kind of stay as those hubs and try to keep them feeling that same way. So feel free, I hope you had a chance to read through that. Figure 4 is the aerial image of the subject property, and then the property just to the west of that is the rest of Solbakken Resorts. And as most rezone applications have, we have a table that compares the two zone districts next to each other. So the change here is shifting the existing boundary between the single-family residential and the RCR zone district. The change in the existing boundary between the existing zone districts appears to be non-problematic as the property seems well suited to the existing use of the property as a part of an existing resort. I've included the sections from the Cook County Zoning Ordinance that outline the single-family residential zone district as well as the proposed resort commercial residential zone district. You'll note that, generally speaking, the permitted uses in the current zone district, the R1, are more restrictive than the uses that are permitted by right in the RCR zone district. Additionally, there is a difference in the lot size requirements. So the RCR is a 5-acre minimum lot size. The addition of this parcel to the existing other Solbakken property makes it just above 5 acres in total. Currently, it is a 1-acre minimum lot size for the R1 on Lake Superior. So this is a conforming R1 parcel. There are more restrictive side yard setbacks. That's the other pretty notable difference between these two different zone districts. That's all I have for the slides. For public noticing, the application was legally noticed in the Cook County News Herald on April 24th. 40 letters of notification were sent to adjacent property owners, as well as county departments, DNR hydrologists, North Shore Management Board, and MnDOT. I've included a public notice map in your packets. For rezones, these notices go out for a half-mile for our regulations. We did not receive any written correspondence by adjacent property owners specific to the rezone request. There was letters for the CUP, but I did not discern in reading those letters that they were specific about the rezone itself. So I just want to be clear about that. And so staff recommendation for consideration, the Cook County zoning map reflects the county's development patterns aligned with the goals and policies of the Cook County Land Use Guide Plan. The proposed zoning map adjustments represents a modification to the boundaries of the existing R1 and the RCR zone districts in the area. Due to the use of the subject parcel being a part of the existing Solbakken Resort, the rezone seems appropriate to add conformity to the historic use and supports the proposed changes of Solbakken moving forward. I have proposed for you some draft findings for the rezone in accordance with the Cook County Zoning Ordinance. I recommend you revisit this after you hold the public hearing and have your discussions and deliberations. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
All right, thank you, Neva. If the applicant is here and they'd like to come to the mic and add anything about this portion, the rezoning portion, feel free.
Nothing to add.
Okay.
The rezone.
Perfect, thank you. Then we will open it up to public comment, if anyone has anything to say on this proposal. Step to the mic. And do bear in mind, again, this is specifically to the rezoning, not to the conditional use permit.
Mark Youngdahl, I live at 175 Fall River Road. I just wanted to say that I think it makes sense just because of the connected use between the two parcels. It's, you know, it is one resort currently. And knowing the applicant, both on a personal and professional level for a while, I have no doubt that the proposed project will not only add, you know, aesthetically fit into the area, but add value to the property and the county, specifically the West End in particular. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? Please state your name and address.
Hi. Name's Mike Todd, 4880 Highway 61. We're the southwest neighbor to Solbakken. I just was a dumb question, but he made a comment about the applicant. Who is the applicant? Is that a lucky soul, but there's a human being behind it? Is that kosher for me to ask?
I think he's right behind you.
And you are?
Side.
You're listed as the agent.
Correct. I'm the managing partner of Legacy.
Okay, thank you. I just was curious. I wasn't sure who was who.
This is our team here.
I kind of figured that, but I wasn't sure.
All right, anyone else? All right, we'll go ahead and close public comment and discuss as a board. Thoughts?
I have nothing to add, or no questions anyway. Seems like it makes sense.
I have nothing on this portion.
Yep. Anything on this end?
Likewise.
Yeah.
I'm curious though, was there a mistake made in the original zoning? Or we don't know? You have an
I
idea?
admittedly did not go back to our much older version of zoning maps. But not to my knowledge. I don't know.
It was probably a private property and they just bought it. You know, like the people that created the resort then bought that and just
left it.
Yeah.
But it is currently, I mean, the utilities are connected currently, correct? Yes, okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty comfortable with these findings of fact, and I think the rezone itself is pretty straightforward and just reflects the current use of the property. So I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the rezoning.
Second?
I'll second.
Patrick? Any further discussion from the board? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Seeing none, motion passes on the request for a rezone for Lucky Soul Holdings and Ledgerock. And then we'll move on to our last item of new business tonight, Lucky Soul Holdings LLC / Ledgerock Holdings LLC. This is the request for a conditional use permit to allow commercial planned unit development for a resort conversion in accordance with the provisions of the Cook County Subdivision Ordinance. Neva, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You have to bear with me. This one's a little bit technical. I will try to make it as painless as I can, but there's a lot to kind of go through. So this property is for both of the properties that we just discussed of Solbakken. So in total, these two parcels include 5.33 deeded acres, 5.0 mapped acres, with approximately 617 feet of Lake Superior shoreline. The parcels are both currently, one parcel zoned RCR and the other is zoned R1, and obviously there's a rezone that was just recommended for approval by the Cook County Planning Commission for both parcels to be zoned RCR, and this would become a conforming RCR parcel if both parcels were zoned RCR. Commercial planned unit developments are a listed conditional use in the RCR zone district. Commercial planned unit developments are not a listed, permitted, or conditional use in the R1 zone district. Therefore, the rezone request would make this allowable within the RCR as proposed. So that's the connection between those two requests. For shoreline classification, Lake Superior is classified as a general development lake due to its unique features. Its shoreline management plan is outlined in the North Shore Management Plan. This request is to allow for a resort conversion of Solbakken Resort. The process of taking an established single ownership resort and platting it out so the units can be held in separate ownership. The property is located in the North Shore Management Zone of Lake Superior. Article 8 of the Cook County Zoning Ordinance outlines subdivision platting provisions within the North Shore Management area. I've included that language directly from the ordinance in your packets, but it talks about land suitability, where we should be looking at water supply and sewage treatment facilities, adequate stewardship measures, making sure the land is suitable for the proposed uses, a lot of the reasons we go through this process. The two parcels, let's see, what here do I really need to go through? Conforming 5-acre RCR. That got a little redundant, my apologies. So that's the zoning map that you see there. You see the two pink blobs along Lake Superior. The current Solbakken Resort is the blob to the left. And that little green highlighted one just to the east or to the right is that parcel that was just proposed for rezoning. So together they would make that 5-acre RCR parcel for this proposal. Planned unit developments, we haven't had a planned unit development application in a while, so I'm just going to give you a little bit about this process. So this is a process that's outlined. It's a little confusing because it's both in the zoning ordinance as a use, but also as the subdivision ordinance as a way of subdividing land. So planned unit development is when you have a plat that's kind of deviating from the typical zoning rules. So that's why the resort conversion is a process for this. So you take an existing resort under single ownership right now. It goes through this process to look at the conditional use permit processes. What is the existing infrastructure on this property? Let's look at the septic. Let's look at the water. Let's look at the shoreline. Does it make sense for this to go into separate ownership for each of these units? So whereas one owner owned 12 units before as a resort, now there's going to be 12 separate owners that all share the infrastructure. in this case, an expansion as well to add more units because there is certain density allowances for this activity in the ordinance. So conceptually, that's planned unit development. They exist for both residential and commercial activities. This would be a commercial planned unit development, which again is a conditional use that's listed in the zoning ordinance. And that allows more of that short-term rental activity. So what I have outlined on this slide is just that general concept. That's an existing resort currently, and they want it to be separately owned. There's a conditional use permit that is first in this process, and the purpose of the conditional use permit is to look at conceptually the plan and identify what conditions could be suitable to make this work, and have those conditions integrated into the plat process. So we know that with existing resorts, there's likely going to be things that don't conform to current regulations because you have existing development. So our job through this process is to identify what is existing on site, what conditions do you want to set if this gets approved to be addressed in the platting process. So if there's nonconformities, if there's issues with water capacity, kind of all of those things, and what conditions do you want to see for the plat. So just broadly speaking, that's why we're here. So preliminary plat would be the next step if this was approved. The preliminary plat, again, is when you look at the proposed actual subdivision of the lot, and then final plat would be following that. And then that 710 is the language from the Cook County subdivision ordinance that recognizes resort conversions. All right, so that's a little planning and zoning 101. So again, a conditional use permit is required for the entire project before the preliminary plat for the whole or any part of this project can be brought forward. I included parts of the concept statement. This process includes 2 phases that include some restoration of existing cabins and some full replacements of other cabins. That site plan that's on the screen is an example from the water plan that shows that connection. So again, that Jonas house is on that single-family residential parcel that's proposed to be RCR, and then that would connect over to that does currently connect over to the other infrastructure on the RCR property. This is the site plan that was included by the applicant to kind of conceptually identify where there are remodels proposed and where there are new cabins proposed. So the green circles are remodels. So there's several units along the lake that will be proposed remodels, so mostly interior remodels. The lodge itself identifies 3 units for remodels. And then there's certain things that will be reconstructed. So the motel in this proposal is to remove the motel and replace that with several cabins. And I've tried to summarize that in a table on page 110 of 156 of your packets. So table 1 identifies the square footage of the existing and kind of approximate proposed. At this stage of the game, we don't want to lock in on very specifics of like, okay, you said cabin 18 is going to be exactly this many square feet. It is mostly important that we recognize what that maximum square footage of inside living space is. And then in the platting process is where kind of the nuts and bolts of the square footage of those structures would really be clarified. So this is kind of just a reference point. One thing about table 1 is I did realize the lodge itself does include 3 units, so I didn't stipulate that in there. So that would need to be a change in one of the draft conditions of approval. So we'll just put a pin in that for right now. There are 2 wells currently on the property. The applicant did provide some information about the wells. It sounds like one well is used a lot more than one other well. And there are 2 septic systems, 2 mounds on the property. The tanks were recently installed and had compliance inspections. There is no detail yet as to whether or not the septic systems that are installed have the full capacity to support this build out that's proposed. So that would certainly need to be a pretty important condition. Quite often our office has recognized historically that with any large plan for a project, it is typically the septic system that is the limiting factor to the density, no matter kind of what our ordinance says. So Even if we provided a condition that said, okay, 23 units maximum with so much living space, if there's not space on the property for the septic system, then that's ultimately not going to be feasible to actually be a reality. And again, that could get clarified for the preliminary plat, that a septic design was provided that shows that infrastructure support. There's the table that is in the packet. I don't anticipate anyone to read it. I just wanted to show that that's what that is for. And then this is the existing sewer map that was in the application. There's several items to kind of go by kind of topically for this proposal. Just for background, Sjogren, longtime establishment in Cook County. Property is currently undergoing a property transfer process with a signed purchase agreement for transfer from Ledgerock Holdings LLC to Lucky Soul LLC. For septic, the property currently has 2 septic mounds. The application indicates in phase 2 may require an expansion to one of the septic mounds. MnDOT did provide a comment indicating that the MnDOT surveyors can establish the right-of-way area to ensure that the mounds are not encroaching into the MnDOT right-of-way. The Cook County Environmental Health Officer also provided some information, and that's in your packet as well, primarily identifying that any expansion in the future needs to have a suitable design to show that it can be supported. For impervious surface coverage, it's unclear with the level of detail in this application whether the project proposal and development plan will increase, with the increase in number of units and supporting infrastructure, such as parking areas, will meet the county's impervious surface coverage requirements. The application estimates open space will be at least 80% of lot coverage. Staff recommend that a condition be set that does strictly require that development does not exceed Section 8.04I of the Cook County Zoning Ordinance for the planned unit development project plans. And that is that impervious surface coverage cannot exceed 30% unless a surface water runoff plan by a registered professional engineer is submitted and approved by the zoning administrator. The surface water runoff plan shall contain at minimum provisions for sediment entrapment and erosion control in order to minimize impacts on receiving waters. And we've also included the definition of impervious surface just for clarity. For wetlands, there's no known factor of wetlands impacting development options at this stage of the project. That, again, would be verified at the preliminary plat stage. For noise, the changes to the proposed resort may increase noise to neighboring properties, in particular to the increased number of units. For lighting, lighting is not addressed in the application. Staff recommend a condition of approval requiring all outdoor lighting to be down-facing and not illuminating neighboring properties. For safe access, and this is a point that should be updated in your packets. So just this afternoon, I got a letter from MnDOT, and it's coming up here in my packet. There we go. MnDOT sent me a comment that said that they have worked with the applicant over the last week, and it is their understanding that they won't need to have a right turn lane anymore, is generally what I've gathered from that. Again, this is our best available information, so this is something, again, that would be truly verified at the preliminary plat stage. At this point, it would be to set conditions. If we're making a decision based on the understanding that no right turn lane is needed, it would be a condition saying no right turn lane is needed, because that's not something that you've included in your technical review at this point. So. Also, there's going to be a proposed change, I believe, to the number of entrances. So instead of, I believe, the current 3 entrances, it would be down to 1 entrance. And I think the applicant can probably give you some more updated information about that as well. It's just what I've gathered from the MnDOT correspondence. In here, I've highlighted that we need to change draft condition number 4. Instead of 20 units, it should include the 23. That was an additional information provided by the MnDOT engineer. That I did not have access to with the layout of the units in that form. So that is the update to safe access. Now back to bluffs. So Cook County, in figure 5, we've got the Cook County zoning map, and this is just a reference point. Staff didn't have capacity to field verify this before this point in time. But our zoning map indicates there might be bluffs on the property, so this would need to be field verified. If there are bluffs, then that means several of the structures are non-conforming. And so we would want to be sure to have conditions that restrict future expansions of non-conforming structures and take that into consideration for the planned unit development, if it's suitable for those structures to be kept there. For parking, the application does indicate parking areas kind of in the non-conforming parking and cabins section of their application. The Cook County Zoning Ordinance does indicate in section 5.16 requirements for off-street loading and parking. Required parking spaces for this activity for tourist accommodations in that classification is 1 parking space for each room or unit and 1 parking space for each non-resident employee. The application describes traffic and circulation as follows. The resort currently has 2 public entrances and a road that runs along the entire property with fire emergency access. Most cabins have individual parking spaces, and we'll be modifying them as necessary to ensure that they're handicap accessible for our guests and protect the soil and water runoff from the parking areas. This may include designating loading and unloading areas, as well as ensuring that we redesign the parking using strategies like oil-absorbent materials, using permeable pavers and rain gardens to divert stormwater runoff toward vegetated areas, etc. There's a parking area by the motel building that can accommodate additional parking as needed. The application indicates performance standard deviations from parking is required as follows. For cabins 1 through 6, we make all efforts to ensure that the parking spaces meet the 40-foot setback. However, due to the grade and the slope behind these cabins, there's no practical way to move them back. We're requesting that at least 1 parking spot per cabin be grandfathered with the condition that we will design them in a way using strategies to mitigate spills and prevent runoffs. For water supply, the Minnesota Department of Health regulates private wells and would be the authority on this item. No information was provided by MDH regarding this proposal. The application does indicate some details about the 2 wells that are on the property. It also includes the following, saying, we're also evaluating if we need to bore another well on the west side of the property. All efforts will be made to ensure that the location of the well is well within the setback of the adjacent property line. And kind of for other considerations, for nonconformities, existing nonconforming cabins and parking areas exist on the property as summarized in figure 6, which is the one that's on your screen. For public noticing, the application was legally noticed in the Cook County News Herald on April 24th. 21 letters of notification were sent to adjacent property owners, as well as county departments, MnDOT, North Shore Management Board, and DNR hydrologist. The notice area for the conditional use permit is the 1/4 mile. So just a clarification of why that map looks different than what's in the rezone application. Written comments were received as follows. Number 1, Nordhus at 11 Wildflower Lane. Object to the conditional use permit, expressing concerns with compatibility with the surrounding area, stress on road infrastructure, source water quantity and quality, impacts to surface waters, quality of life to neighboring property owners, and property value impacts, as well as concerns with precedent. MnDOT provided 2 comments. And just, again, this is one of the items that can be clarified. We just recently had some different correspondence from MnDOT. I think in general, we want to ensure that the right-of-way is clearly established to ensure there's no current encroachment into the MnDOT right-of-way, as that's a pretty important part of the infrastructure. And then, maybe a condition clarification about the turn lane discussion, and then the number of entrances. Those are kind of the 3 MnDOT considerations for your further discussion items. The Cook County Soil and Water Conservation District just raised some questions, many of which I believe are addressed within this packet. And then the Cook County Environmental Health Officer provided their memo, which again is already included in the packet that we discussed. There are some draft findings, but again, there's going to be a lot of discussion coming forth here, so you can revisit these draft findings and amend them or create your own after you've had the public comment period and deliberations. And finally, for staff recommendation for consideration, the proposed resort conversion and redevelopment of Solbakken Resort represents a significant reinvestment into a long-established commercial lodging property on the North Shore. The proposal would allow individual ownership of resort units through a planned unit development structure while maintaining the property's overall resort character and increasing its commercial lodging function. Staff note that the resort conversions are specifically identified in the Cook County Subdivision Ordinance through the planned unit development provisions. The proposal includes phased development of existing cabins, removal of the existing motel structure, and construction of additional lodging units and accessory sauna facilities. While the proposal generally appears capable of meeting the maximum allowable inside living space and commercial recreational square footage standards, the submitted plans remain conceptual in nature. Several development details, including final structure placement, bluff setback verification, and parking layouts, stormwater management, and impervious surface calculations, will require additional review during subsequent platting stages. The property is located within the North Shore Management Zone of Lake Superior, where protection of water quality, shoreline resources, and safe site design are important considerations. Staff note that the proposal may increase development intensity on the site through additional cabins, parking demand, circulation needs, and associated infrastructure. Although the application estimates approximately 80% open space coverage, insufficient detail currently exists to conclusively determine compliance with impervious surface limitations under Section 8.04I of the Cook County Zoning Ordinance. Staff recommend a condition requiring the project to comply with impervious surface standards, including submission of engineered stormwater runoff plans if thresholds are exceeded. Existing non-conforming structures and parking areas are present on the property. The applicant proposes reconstruction of certain cabins in locations intended to better conform to setbacks, while also requesting deviations related to parking setbacks for cabins 1 through 6 due to topographic constraints. Staff note that additional survey information and site-specific design details will be necessary to evaluate whether requested deviations are appropriate and whether practical alternatives exist. The proposal may also increase traffic volumes entering and exiting Highway 61. The MnDOT comments, as we've already talked about, this part of the staff narrative would be updated. So again, we can rediscuss right turn lane, right-of-way setback clarification, as well as the number of entry units from MnDOT. The Cook County Environmental Health Officer, Cook County Soil and Water Conservation District both identified questions regarding septic system capacity and future wastewater demand associated with the phased redevelopment plan. The application indicates existing septic infrastructure may require expansion during later phases of development. Staff recommend that all applicable septic, well, and wastewater requirements be verified prior to issuance of land use permits for future phases. Neighboring property owner expressed concerns related to compatibility with the surrounding area, traffic, noise, water quality, property values, and cumulative development intensity along the North Shore corridor. Staff note that the surrounding area contains a mixture of resort, residential, and commercial lodging uses, and that the RCR district anticipates resort-oriented development. However, careful review of lighting, parking design, stormwater management, landscaping, and operational impacts will be important to minimize impacts to adjacent properties. Overall, staff find this development proposal generally consistent with the intent of the RCR district and the plan unit development provisions of the Cook County Subdivision Ordinance, provided the project demonstrates compliance with all applicable dimensional, environmental, infrastructure, and access requirements through subsequent review processes and conditions of approval. The purpose of the conditional use permit for a resort conversion, such as this project, is described in the Cook County Subdivision Ordinance as follows. Deficiencies involving water supply and sewage treatment, impervious coverage, open space, and shore recreation facilities must be corrected as a part of the conversion or as specified in the conditional use permit. The Planning Commission should consider adding to the potential findings listed and modify, amend, or adopt as they determine appropriate after the public hearing and recommendation of the Cook County Board of Commissioners. The Planning Commission can determine additional technical information if necessary to make recommendation and table the application if necessary. And that last sentence was back when I thought a right turn lane may be absolutely required. So we may not need to table depending on how the discussion goes. I've included some draft conditions as well, kind of addressing several of the items we did discuss. And again, number 4A would definitely need to be updated. That lists 20 dwelling units, and that was before I recognized that there's 3 lodging units within the lodge itself. So that would need to be 23. And that is what I mostly have for you. That's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, if the applicant would like to step forward, and if you have anything to add, state your name and address, please.
Thank you, Neva, for presenting on my behalf. I'm Sai Bazawada, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our proposal. I am representing the team behind Lucky Soul, and I just want to acknowledge some of my team members are here, Stephanie Slanger, Parker Slanger, and the current owners, David and Sean Howe. Feels a little surreal for me just to sit here. Little did I know that, 20 years ago when I came here as a housekeeping intern in Lutsen, that I'll be sitting here asking to redevelop a resort in Lutsen. So I guess things do come around a full circle. Through many experiences of developing resorts, managing resorts on the North Shore and in Minnesota, I've come to know why the North Shore is such a special place for many people, including people in this room, as well as the guests that come and visit. And for me, it has always felt home. So I think it's with just to say at the outset, it's with that admiration for the great outdoors that will be a big driver in behind the redevelopment of Solbakken. So our proposal, I mean, Solbakken, as Neva said, it's a legacy resort. It's what you would consider a mom and pop resort. It's been in Lutsen. I mean, it's been operating year round for almost 5 decades. So and if you just read through some of the guest journals in the cabins and the units, you will see why that place has created so many special memories for people. And guests and their families that have been coming up, and it's just that small cabin resort feel that has been very appealing. So our investment into this project absolutely intends to maintain that small resort vibe and feel. Small resorts in Minnesota have been declining since the 70s. I mean, there were 3,400 resorts back in the 70s, I think 72 or something, and now there are under 700 resorts for various reasons, whether as land values have gone up, small cabins were sold off to either to build private homes or individual vacation homes or rentals, or they got consolidated into larger properties, and just so small resorts continue to decline. And so we definitely feel, I mean, based on our last development that we did at Breezy Point Cabins on Lake Superior in Two Harbors, that proved that this model still exists, that there's a market for it. People love the small cabin feel. So our intent is to keep that vibe. We do not want to build a large resort. We do not want to build restaurants and pools and water parks or whatever. I mean, none of that. I mean, I think our intent is to really maintain that vibe. In our proposal, there are existing cabins that we plan to renovate. We think the location is fantastic. There are older, dilapidated cabins that we will definitely rebuild. And of course, all the density, additional density request is all what we're asking for is all based on what the ordinance already stipulates. So we're not asking for anything more than that. And again, that's a request, so that if we can get the request to get the maximum, as Neva said, we will still have to evaluate and get the site surveys and make sure that, first of all, we can even get those additional cabins. So there are currently a total of 16 rental units on property. Our redevelopment is adding just 7 additional cabins. And these are just tiny cabins. I mean, you're talking anywhere from 300 to 600 square foot cabins. So we're not talking big structures. Again, we're talking, we want to keep that intent of that small resort feel. The other thing, we certainly, one of the, since submitting the application, that was on April 1st, we have obviously been working a lot based on all the conditions that Neva had listed. And some of them, for example, the variances that we are asking aren't because of convenience. It's more due to site constraints and we're working with what we have. So in some sense, it is a little more challenging to work with the existing constraints as opposed to, let's say, developing on raw land or starting from scratch. And so I think those are the things that we are absolutely mindful of, but at the same time, we fully intend to conform and comply with all the conditions that Neva listed. I mean, just also, as a side, our discussions with Neva and her team have been very positive, very constructive. They've been very helpful. So I have absolute confidence that we will absolutely work through all of these conditions. Just like Neva said, even the Department of Highway, we worked with them. They said we don't need a right turn lane. They didn't think, initially they thought it was a big redevelopment, but it's not. It's just a minor enhancement. We're keeping the use the same. We want to keep these units renting year round. We certainly, I mean, the intent of the reselling these cabins as fractional shares is because again, to survive as a small resort, to survive and thrive, that is the model needed, given the current reality of land values and how, Lake Superior frontage, it's prime real estate. So we definitely think this redevelopment will help continue sustaining Solbakken. A couple of other points that were brought up, for example, the well and the sewer. Again, we've been working with Jesse and making sure that he was out there yesterday looking at the septic mounds. Currently, as is for phase 1, that's why we proposed a phased approach, so we don't also just go all in and do it methodically. So the phase 1 obviously will meet all the requirements, but then phase 2 is where we'll evaluate and see whether or not we actually need to expand the sewer capacity. And we've already started doing that by installing water meters on the wells to understand flows. And so between now and the next 90 days, we will be monitoring the flows, so just to say, okay, even during the peak season, which is, let's say, July or beginning of August, if flows are considerably lower than what the system has been designed for, well, then that solves obviously a big headache for all of us. But at the same time, if they are not, then we will absolutely design it. And we've already talked through certain areas where the second mound on site will enable us to do that. Same thing with the water, because that again will help us understand. We're also looking at how we can creatively, as part of the redevelopment, utilize like low flow shower heads, also new toilets. Smart toilets these days will really help. We had when we were managing Caribou Highlands for a big property, same issues. We had a lot of water issues, but we went through the whole change and made all these changes that I just said, and it significantly changed the way our water. It changed the water usage dramatically. So I think we'll taking all that experience and learnings from other resorts and developments that we have done, we will certainly enhance. I think all of that will go in. We're also, in terms of the impervious service calculations, we'll share that with NEVA. We in the last 2 weeks, we have been doing that more. We're certainly under that threshold, but again, we'll make sure that we work with NEVA and a team to make sure that they see it the same way we're seeing it. So, and more importantly, a successful redevelopment of this resort will significantly increase your property tax income for the county as well, because conservatively, we think it'll more than quintuple the income that it currently generates from this property, without adding any additional burden or asking for additional resources from the county. So I do think that I would think that that's a big deal for the county. And not to mention that a significant redevelopment, a significant investment into this will only increase the desirability of Cook County and Lutsen as a destination for generations to come. I think nobody wants to see older cabins, and it's just part of the process of how resorts and these type of rental properties have evolved on the North Shore over the years. So we are definitely excited. We're definitely looking forward to redeveloping this project and staying true to the intent of what we have and goals set up for it. So we ask that you approve this permit with the conditions, and we'll meet them, and so that we can get to work. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other, or we'll open it up to public comment now. Are there any others that would like to make a public comment on this conditional use proposal? Step to the microphone and just state your name and address again, please.
Yes, again, Michael Todd, next door neighbor to Solbakken, 4880. Speaking as the closest neighbor to this project, I think, I've looked it over as carefully as I can. Conceptually, I don't have any fundamental objections to it. I think a rejuvenation of Solbakken is probably for the best. It would be nice to make the North Shore rigidly static and nothing changes and nothing gets built. If that were true, I wouldn't have been able to build my house. So it's not going to happen. I can see personally some issues. Construction creates noise and dust and people and all that sort of stuff. Again, fortunately, most of the building that I see on the plan takes place a reasonable distance away from my property line. It's on the far side of the lodge and the far end of the property. So other than the remodel of cabins 1 through 4, it shouldn't be much of a problem that I can see. I can complain about construction noise, but Solbakken had to live with my construction noise when we built the house, so I can't very legitimately say anything about that.
You're a great neighbor, Todd. You're a great neighbor.
There you go. I do have only one core concern, and it has to do with water and wells. The well on our property is an original well. I don't know how old it is. It was on Polly Erickson's property before we bought the property. It's a very low flow well. I can run it dry real easy. And I have. So we've learned very well in our house to sort of not do too much stuff at once. This project is going to dramatically increase water usage on the Solbakken property. And what are the assurances in here that I'm not going to end up with a dry well if the aquifer gets pumped down? That was kind of a question.
If I may procedurally in this process,
Please.
so the public can raise what questions they want for the planning commission to consider, but it's not like a back and forth to answer every specific
Okay.
question, but they'll have the opportunity to discuss those
That would
concerns.
simply be, that would be my real personal concern. What would be my recourses if that were to occur? That's it.
All right, thank you very much. Any other members of the public wish to comment on this proposal?
Hi there. My name is Inger Andrus, and I am with Edina Realty. So a combination, just even personally, because my husband and I live on Lake Superior as well in Lutzen, and to talk about the wells, our well is 350 feet deep, whereas our neighbors is only 175, and they're just vary so much. So it's hard to say how that's all connected, so obviously go to the professionals. But from hearsay with different clients and understanding that there's just such a wide variety along Lake Superior with that. So I'm not a professional with that, but that's just my experience with it, to take it or leave it. I really do, I want to, I guess, represent more of clients that have come in and really mourned how much they have missed Lutzen Resort, how much they, the fires and things recently, and that they would love to see something that they can, a historical place, be rejuvenated. And there is actually even a group of people that come with Solbakken once a year that come and clean, I believe, the spring cleaning outside for free, because they're so dedicated followers of wanting to upgrade and to keep this going. So I just want to say that I think there's a lot of people who are really longing for that special place up here on Lutzen, on Lake Superior, that they can have, whether it's their family events or any kind of gathering together, the opportunity to do that. I believe this project and proposal is going to allow there to bring some hope to some people who've been very longing for that, that I've heard on this side from people coming and visiting the North Shore, and I just wanted to share that. So I'm excited, and then I'm also actually representing the seller, so I have to definitely state that, and had to do some vetting of different people who have been putting in offers, and so also vetted the buyer here and have seen several other projects that he has worked on, and so on Lake Superior, and seems to be highly regarded in what his work does. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
Hello again, I'm David Howe, and with my wife, I own Ledgerock Holdings. And my wife and I came up to look at the fall colors. She'd been bugging me for years to go on a vacation, so we came for 2 days. And fell in love with the North Shore and had money to invest. And I'm the dairy farmer that accidentally bought a resort. And so it's been a huge learning curve for us over 13 years. And our love for the North Shore has just continued. And we've met a lot of friends and clients that we love. And I spent a lot of nights wondering, as we age, then time is a big factor for us and how we spend that. And I wanted to rejuvenate the resort, and we looked at a lot of proposals, and it was really difficult to find something that would cash flow with a single owner. And we know that from owning it, that keeping the resort going, you know, was kind of scary. And to pass that on to a young family and then have them struggle financially, that's difficult too. And when Cy and his team came along, then things changed for us. The excitement was back, and he has a great history. He knows more about running a resort than I do, and is a lot better at it too. I'm a really hard worker, but I'm not a great manager. And this gives the resort that we love an opportunity to add value to the community. And on behalf of the future guests, I think it's the right move. As far as water, then I think Cy's on the right course. Monitoring usage now, you need to know where you are currently to move forward. I think in the plans, and we've discussed it a lot, is to drill an additional well on the west end. And we've been working with existing wells that have been refracked. And I think between better usage of the water that we're using now and then additional water source would really help. And Mr. Todd's a great neighbor, and one of the reasons why we're selling is because our son Christopher, it's not really his thing to take over. So, and Mr. Todd knows Chris very well. Anyways, I could chat all night, but I know you guys are busy, and thank you very much for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment period and discuss as a board. Dave, you look like you're itching to say. Start us off.
I have a couple of concerns, one of which is already addressed. I was concerned that if there was going to be a required turn lane, that one of the septic mounds in Figure 4 would actually fall within the right-of-way, which would eliminate a whole septic system. It is very close to Lake Superior. I'm actually kind of familiar with the resort. I've been there over the years. So that's a concern, but it's, you know, solvable some way or another. But I would propose that, well, there already has to be a second location on the property that would be an acceptable mound location, as I understand it. So that would be taken care of already. The other thing was the stipulation on square feet lists livable space. It does not list mechanicals, garages, outbuildings, sheds, firewood storage, anything like that. And my question is simply, is there any limitation or any way to quantify what that might be moving forward? Just notice that as a point that's not spelled out. And then the last thing, it would be a question for Cy. The new buildings, will they all have kitchen space? Because that will change both the amount of water usage and septic usage, because the motel units, I presume, do not at this point. It will also, if they don't have kitchens, those people will be leaving and going to restaurants for meals, and so that will increase traffic. That's just a question.
Yeah, why don't you actually, as we discussed, come on back to the microphone and we might have some questions for you as we go, so.
So to answer your question, yes, the new cabins will have small kitchens, again, appropriately sized to the units. If I'm not mistaken, the motel units currently have kitchens.
they do.
Small kitchens. So they already have kitchens. So, yeah, so we will be sizing them appropriately. Yeah.
So in theory, water usage won't change significantly.
Right.
Except for the expansion of the.
Correct.
More
Right.
buildings.
Right.
Okay. Those are just the things that I thought of, not necessarily stoppers, just points of discussion.
I think maybe to just circle back to mechanical space sheds, that's encompassed in impervious surface coverage, correct? I mean, that's
Right.
going to get accounted for there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say between open space requirements and impervious surface coverage, those are kind of the limitations that state kind of how much development can happen.
Yep. Okay.
All right. Good.
Do you know what triggers a turn lane?
Yeah, so from the conversations with MnDOT, at least the way Jim explained to me was, he said, well, if I didn't know how big and they didn't know how many existing rental units were there, so he was like, I mean, I don't want to quote Jim, but this is what exactly he said. He said, well, if you're doing like 80 to 100 units, that's when we will definitely have to look at this. And I said, of course not. So what we did was I sent him a separate attachment where we showed the existing rental units as is, and then how many additional we are proposing. And so then based on that, he's like, so that was one consideration. The second consideration was there was no change in use, meaning we will continue to run this as a resort. So that was the other consideration that he listed as, oh, okay, you're not changing the use. Unlike, I think he may have misunderstood, thinking these are going to be sold off as private units and not run as a resort. So I said there's no change in use. So that's the other one. And then I think the other thing that gave him comfort was that we would consolidate the existing accesses into one access. So one of the things that we said we'll work with him on figuring out what is the best among the current accesses, which one will be the most appropriate one to do that. And I think that made him feel very comfortable with it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question on the fractional ownership model.
Sure.
So is this to say that someone specifically owns a unit, or they own a fractional financial share in the resort?
Yeah, so it's a deeded property. So it's just to give you a reference, it'd be no different. For example, Surfside right now in Tofty. That's because all the Surfside properties are all, most of them at least, are fractional ownership.
Mm-hmm.
So what that means is, and maybe I'll give you some more context, is as Lake Superior land became very expensive, the number of people that could afford $1 million second home significantly shrank. So this concept was started back in Vail in the 70s, where they introduced quarter shares or 6 shares, 8 shares, and now that has become very prevalent in touristy areas. So what that means is each cabin or each unit, we are proposing quarter shares. So each unit would have 4 quarter share owners. Essentially, you would get 13 weeks in the year. 52 weeks divided by 4, 13. It's not timeshare. We don't like that word. It's a deeded property which you can resell just like any other real estate. We did this. I was involved when I was with Odyssey Development and Resorts. We did with the Larsemont Cottages in Two Harbors. So that was the first property in Minnesota to do fractional ownership. Huge success. The most recent project I was involved with was Breezy Point Cabins, just next to Larsmont Cottages. Very similar to Solbakken in the sense of tiny, tiny cabins. And these were 12 cabins right on the water that we again, quarter shared and sold. So there were 12 cabins, 48 shares. So the same thing would apply here. We would have essentially then that, just like if you were to sell like a Caribou Highlands or a Bluefin or Lutz and Sea Villas, you have whole own, meaning owners own it outright and they have a homeowner association. It's the same thing here. You would have a homeowner association. There's all centrally managed. They would pay dues to cover, all the expenses. So everything is essentially split 4 ways, is the best way. Does that help?
It does, yeah. So just to clarify, they hold deed title to a
That is correct.
property, okay.
Yeah. So they hold the deed to they're as legally described. The association would own the common areas, for example. So, yeah. It's just an affordable way to own, to have real estate.
Any other thoughts?
I just, a couple questions. I like this idea. Actually, it's kind of retro. Where I live on Cascade Beach Road, that originally was all little resorts with little bitty cabins, and then they all got sold off, and I almost wish it would have got left the way it was. But anyways, with the 50% cover open space requirement, theoretically, there's like 100,000 square feet of available space here, correct?
Whatever 5.33 acres converted to square feet.
It's over 239,000 square feet total. Like if you took 5.33 acres times 43,000, yeah.
And to meet the 50%,
70%,
open space is more difficult to meet than the 30% impervious. So really, in reality, what you're proposing is actually a fairly small footprint on this whole property.
Correct.
Which I like. I mean, gives you a lot of opportunities to move things around. The other thing, I just wanted to refresh my mind for memory, for process. So this is kind of a 3-step process. There's a CUP. If that gets approved, then they come back.
Preliminary plat is
Plat
next.
comes in after that, and then there's a final plat
Correct.
process.
So there is a public hearing for the preliminary plat, and so that's where there would be one more public hearing with the public being able to comment. There is no public hearing for the final plat. It is simply presenting to you the final plat. You are basically seeing that everything that was outlined as preliminary plat conditions is addressed.
Right, and so the conditional use permit is really a very conceptual process.
Yes, it's
Which is what we've seen, and I think we've actually seen, in my opinion, it's a pretty good example of a nice concept of what's going to happen here. And there's still room to move the pieces around on the board, so to speak. So, yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm kind of excited about this. So, other than that, I have no other questions or comments.
Mr. Chair? I wanted to talk a little bit about the source water quantity question. So last year, the year before, we had a public hearing case that questioned one property's impact by a neighboring property's well. And so I contacted our local well driller to talk to him about, in his perspective, how does he talk to people about whether or not their neighbor's well is running their own dry. And through that conversation, what he shared with me was that when we think about our well water in Cook County, a lot of us think of like a straw going down into a cup, and we're all sharing from the same cup. In effect, that's not what our water source looks like in the ground here. Instead, it's like we all have little rivers, and the well driller is drilling down until he hits your little river underneath. And so that's where that fractional fracking term comes in there. So he said that more often than not, people are at different distances. It's like a little unlikely that one person's straw is going sideways into another person's ground river. And those are not his terms, those are my terms. Just for the record, ground river is not a well driller term. So what he told me was more often than not, It is a person, like, there are certain areas of the county that do have drier wells. I tried to look up in the Minnesota Well Index what this specific area looks like. I can't find the wells on Solbakken on the Minnesota Well Index. There are wells on either side, but there's not a high quantity of wells to really look at that. The well driller told me that there's a certain metric, if wells are producing at least 3 gallons per minute, that's deemed as like a good producing well. So I think it's definitely something that could be discussed and certainly evaluated at the preliminary plat stage, or even this stage, if we wanted to collect more information. At this point in time, without more well records, there's not a lot to really go off of very quantifiably what's in the records. And I'm not exactly sure how, like, Solbakken wells, I haven't gotten into here. Sometimes they're like paper files that just never made it over to MDH during that paper to digital transference of records. So I just wanted to kind of clarify, it's not like we all have straws going to the same pot of water. It's more so like little rivers. And that's why the depths vary so much between different property owners, why one person's neighbor's well is 300 feet, another one is 400 feet, et cetera. So just to clarify on some of those points.
Out of order, is that on file here?
The well?
Yeah.
No, when Minnesota Well Index is an online.
No, but does the county maintain information on the well on my property?
No, it's all through the Minnesota Department of Health. Yep.
But it is pretty easy to find online. I've looked. As I also have a well, it's not on. Classic.
Yes.
Neva, I have a question about the condition number 13. Can you briefly touch base on exactly what that is meaning? Open space areas identified within the planned unit development shall remain undeveloped?
Yeah, so it's
exactly
just
saying there.
Right, so open space areas, so that 50% open space. Shouldn't be, you shouldn't put like your garages in the open space, except for these specific uses. So we're saying that in the open space, permitted recreational facilities, utilities, this would allow the septic mounds, stormwater, so if there's a stormwater pond needed or a rain garden to affect the water runoff, and access-related improvements. So if there needs to be, that's back when I thought we were at right turn lane and we might need like some pull-offs or something. This can be very malleable. I think right now, this is just starting language for you, but when we talk about open space, this is a question our office gets a lot, is can the septic system be in the open space? No one knows that the tank is there, so to me it's green space, but if you want that open space to truly not include utilities, all that's gonna affect down the road, what space is available for development. So this is again just the starting point.
Okay. I don't have anything else.
I'll just say, I agree, I'm excited. I'm a big co-op guy, and this isn't exactly a co-op, but it shares some elements, and I think rather than cutting things up into the smallest little pieces, holding it as a larger holding and making people work together on that is generally a good concept. So I'm really in agreement with that.
All right, with that being said, I'm going to make a motion to approve with the conditions for consideration, changing number 4 to 23 dwellings instead of 20. And I think we're covered with the parking with number 11, A and B. So I think those are fine. So yes, I'm just going to leave it as is with that only change.
Mr. Chair? One thing that we found with some conditional use permits is the board, when you make a recommendation based on conditions, I think it would be good to add a condition that says, if these conditions can't be met, the conditional use permit is null and void.
Yeah.
We've kind of ran into that before where people can't meet the conditions, then we're in a really awkward position. So I think maybe trying to incorporate a condition like that. Also, I think condition 9C about the right turn lane needs to probably be rephrased I think right now you're making your decision based on the understanding that a right turn lane is not required.
But that could
But
change.
I think leaving that in there is good, because it says a right turn lane shall be installed if determined necessary by MnDOT. So I think keeping that as is needed.
True, but if a right turn lane is required, would you be making the same decision right now? To Commissioner Member Seaton's point, if the right turn lane was needed, that might be impacting utilities on site. So I want you to consider that if later on we realize a right turn lane is needed, would you be making the same decision? Is that okay by you? Or do you feel that you need other information? Because this application was reviewed by, at least by staff, based on the understanding that no right turn lane was needed, so we don't have any information about where that space is for the right turn lane. So
Okay.
I just want to think ahead on some of those, because these are the things that kind of later on make things a little messy.
Okay, so,
But it also has lists that the septic and well, so that's a requirement. So if that does, and there's another location, then that will just be moved.
Yeah, so that's my question to you. It's, is if a right turn lane is okay, is needed, are you okay with that? And you would see that in the preliminary plat stage.
Right.
If you feel that you would have a different decision, that you're making this approval based on not needing a right turn lane, then you should stipulate that in your conditions, just to be really clear about your understanding of what you believe you're approving, and putting some safeguards in place of when you would need this conditional use permit to be amended or reapplied for under different conditions.
okay, and then adding number 15, is this something that we're going to add in all conditions going forward? That if a single condition cannot be met, then the CUP becomes void?
Yeah, I think maybe a statement that says the conditional use permit is null and void if all the conditions as listed cannot be met. And you could ask our Assistant County Attorney, M. Westerland, if she feels that that is an appropriate condition.
It's a great universal condition.
Okay, thank you.
I think you should, as a matter of course, have that, because things can come up down the road and you don't want problems manifesting due to your approval and not being specific enough about the contingencies. Risk mitigation.
Mr. Chair. Is that not implicit in the entire concept of a conditional use permit?
It is.
It is, but it needs to be
But
stated.
it's not stated.
I don't want to talk about another case, but we've had another case where conditions couldn't be met, and the board was really left in a weird place of saying a thing was met, but you all made a decision based off of certain understandings. So I just want to be more specific about your understandings and being really clear when the application really just needs to be out of here and just redone.
I think it's probably good hygiene, just to do that, so.
Okay, so then back to number 9, access requirements, the planned unit development.
Mr. Chair, I know Courtney's reading through it too, but I just read through the end. I don't have any issue because it says you got to comply with MnDOT, including but not limited to. So if MnDOT comes up with other conditions, you got to meet MnDOT's
Yeah.
conditions.
And they specifically say to ensure septic mounds are not located. So I would assume that if they can't do 9A, then the CUP would become void.
If the subject mount's being impacted, yep.
Yes.
Yep.
So
I guess the question is, do we
covered.
want to address the question of whether we would treat this differently if there is a right turn lane or not?
Right. No.
I think if you can still draw me a map where these utilities are on there and there's a right turn lane, I don't really have an issue, and so I think keeping it in there with the addition of 15, our new boilerplate, that feels good to me, right? Like
Right.
that's
I agree.
Well, and I just feel like there's only one turn lane on that 61 in that entire area, where there's a lot going on in some of those other areas. So I just felt,
somewhat unlikely.
extremely unlikely.
Yeah, Caribou Trail's the only right turn lane through that whole
Yeah.
stretch.
So I'm going to say I am comfortable as is, and I would
Well, we
make
get
a
another
motion
whack at
the
it,
same.
Mhm.
What?
We
Right.
get another stab at it later.
So just to, little housekeeping, we're at,
Yes.
we changed 4. We amended the
Yes.
number of units. keeping 9 as is and adding a 15.
15.
Correct.
Yep. CUP void if a single condition cannot be met,
All right.
correct?
I mean, I would say the
How would you
conditional
like
use
it?
permit is null and void if conditions listed above cannot be met. That
Right.
way, like, if two
Perfect.
conditions can't be met, it's still good to go.
Right.
Mhm.
People play verb games sometimes.
Mhm.
Can we wait for the actual wording of that amendment to be confirmed by legal staff? Is that possible? Can we do that? Just to make sure we've got the right words if we're really trying to make this a thing
Mhm.
going forward.
Mm-hmm.
In regards to the proposed.
Number 15.
15.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. I don't know if you.
Realize you don't
tabled
like
it,
that,
but, I mean, you could.
Neva,
say-
can you restate number 15 one more time?
The conditional use permit is null and void if the conditions listed above cannot be met.
If the, okay. Is that
I would
okay?
like time to take it back to my boss. So this
Okay.
just seems important if it's going to be one of the universal conditions on all CUP
Mhm.
things going forward, so. I'm
We can
comfortable.
address it before we go to the county board meeting. I think
Yes.
we understand the intent of it, and we'll
Mhm.
get the
Okay.
specific language corrected by then.
Okay.
If you just want to say that language with the caveat that, you know,
Mhm.
our office will approve.
Right, so we can still move
Form
forward.
has to
Yeah, I would-
Yep.
we
We've
could make
done
it as a
that.
part of the,
Okay.
part of the motion could be like with condition 15 verified by the county attorney's office.
Yep.
Okay.
Add number 16.
No, it's not other conditions. It's just part of the motion.
Condition on the condition?
By the time
Okay,
we get
we're
to
trying.
30, we might want to skip.
Right.
So I
All
will.
right. There's a motion.
Yes.
Oh, I will second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Seeing none, motion passes and will be recommended to the Board of Commissioners
Based on
Very
the
exciting.
findings listed.
based on those findings and conditions.
Your office is going to be very
And amended.
busy.
Oh, Mr.
Alrighty.
Chair,
I mean, really.
make a
That's-
motion that we adjourn.
And now
I will
your
second
office
the
is
motion
busy.
to adjourn.
yeah.
All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Opposed?
And let's post the time.
Meeting is adjourned.
Let's
Yes.
post the time.
6:11.
6:11.
Why?
Because he wanted to know what the time was.
Oh.